This is a OWASP threat dragging demo by Mike Goodwin. Go ahead.
Okay, hello everybody. So yeah, I'm going to talk about Threat Dragon, which is an open source OWASP project I've been working on for a little while now. Helped more recently by a few other collaborators, notably John Gadsden, who's really today the main contributor, I think, to the project. So I've got a tiny bit of PowerPoint just to frame it, and it's mostly demo. If you want to ask questions, I think I'll probably be able to manage if you just kind of put your hand up or ask them in the chat. But I do want to make sure there's time at the end for questions. So if you want to leave them to then, that's also fine. Okay, so just in terms of the basics of what is Threat Dragon, well, it's an incubator project with OWASP. So it's one of the very first stage projects. Although I would say relative to most of the incubator projects, it's quite mature. So we've asked for promotion to labs. I think that might have happened at the Dublin conference if that had gone on, but because it was cancelled, that didn't happen. So we're kind of figuring out now how we might get the project assessed properly to see if it should get promoted to labs. I think it meets the requirements of it now. Basically, it's a stride type threat modeling tool. It works cross-platform, so we have an installed version for Windows, for Macs, and for Linux. So obviously, it's open source, being OWASP, and I would say it's in many ways similar to the Microsoft tool that a lot of people are familiar with. But the main difference is, I would say, in terms of well, the cross-platformness is kind of obviously a difference in the open sourceness. But in terms of our general approach to it, we're aiming for really good user experience. Should be kind of easy and friendly to use, enjoyable to use, but also integration. You can judge whether we've achieved that or not, but also integration into developer workflow. So we don't want threat models to be something that kind of sits in a dusty cabinet and is never referred to. Now we haven't really realized that yet in the project, but it's definitely kind of on our roadmap and part of our design ethos. And the last thing is, it's not a tool that's trying to do a ton of automatic generation of threats. It's not really trying to do too much as a tool. So my philosophy with it is that threat modeling is something which one of its strengths is that it helps you or encourages you to think quite deeply about the security of the applications you're building. So I don't really want it to be something which kind of you press a button, it generates threats, you kind of mitigate all the threats and don't have to think too hard in the way that SaaS, for example, often is. So it's something which was supposed to help you think rather than replace your need for thinking. Just last slide before the demo. In terms of the tech stack, it's all JavaScript, HTML, CSS. The main libraries used are Angular for the front end and Bootstrap for the CSS framework. And the diagramming library it uses is called Joint.js, which is an open source, or it's a free version of a commercial library. We're actually, one of the things we're wanting to do is to replace that, possibly replace that tool. But anyway, that's how it is today. It comes in two versions. So actually, I'll talk about the web variant first. So we have a web application version of it, which is based on Node. And the model storage for that is in GitHub. So what it does is it places the model files. The idea is it places them next to where your source code is, so it's kind of close to to the application you're building. But the problem with that web app is that it requires excessive permissions. Really, it needs quite a lot of access due to GitHub OAuth clients have very broad, coarse-grained scopes, so it requires probably too much access. And as a result of pushback on people using it for that, we developed the desktop variant, which is based on Electron. That's kind of how we get our cross-platformness. And instead of using GitHub, it stores models just on the file system, as you'd expect. From the point of view of code, they share greater than 90% of the same code. I'm not certain what the exact number is in terms of lines of code, but really the only difference is the shell of it and the model storage. Everything else is the same. You'll hardly be able to tell the difference between the things if you look at them. And the last technical point, the model files are stored in JSON format. So they are interpretable by machines and just about readable by people as well. It kind of structures that. I'll show you one of the model files later, but it kind of looks relatively readable, I would say. So that's a brief overview. Is there any questions on that before I do a demo from anybody? No.
I don't see any questions.
Okay, I'll move on. So this is the opening screen that you see. I'm demoing the desktop variant, by the way, not the web variant. But as I say, they look almost identical, so you wouldn't notice too much difference. So this is the screen that you get when you open. Actually, the most important thing is it has quite a cute logo. So on the welcome screen, you're presented with three options essentially. You can either open a model from your file system, you can start a completely new one, or we do have a kind of sample model that just sort of showcases some of the different features of it that you can open just to kind of exploring if you're new to the product. So if I go through the creating of a new model, so it asks you, hopefully you can see this, it's asking for a file location. So if I click demo model, then it takes you to a field where you can just edit some simple information about the model. So it's it has a title. Oops. It has a title. Just some very simple information about it. You can add different contributors just so it kind of lists out who's helped with it. And the most important bit really is the diagramming. So you can add a new diagram. And then save that. And then you can, at that point, you can then get into doing the decomposition and the diagramming of the tool. So if you click on the thumbnail, you get this is the kind of palette for putting things together. So it's a usual kind of data flow type elements you can do. So if you you can add different elements to the model. If you select it, you get like some simplistic properties of the model, so you can which you can edit. Okay, the properties there. It has a concept of putting things in or out of scope. So the purpose of the out of scope is that you want to show it in the diagram because it helps contextualize the rest of the diagram and make it make sense. But you don't want to do any threat generation for that. So if you click out of scope, it's actually for a reason. And it shows it on the diagram as being kind of dotted like that. So visually, you can see that, that's not a thing that you're going to be interested in modeling. So there are other, obviously, you can do things like duplicate the elements. So if you want to make a copy, you can make new ones and then edit their properties. If you want to link them together, there's really two ways of doing that. So if you, oops, if you select one and then click that sort of chevron-shaped icon there, and then click another model element, it will place a data flow between them. So the data flows, again, they're sort of similar to the other model elements. You can select them and then type their properties, make them out of scope or not out of scope. You can add like vertices to them to make this the shape look neat and tidy for you. So you can add links that way. The other way you can add a link is just more directly by clicking on there, and then you can grab the handles at the end. You can grab the handles at the end and link it to the model elements directly that way. And then there's the usual other sorts of elements like data stores and external actors that you can add. And again, if you want to kind of rewire the model in some way, you can kind of move the flows around that way. The last thing probably to say is you can add trust boundaries. So they are these dotted lines here. And again, they kind of behave a lot like the data flows in the sense of how you move them around. You can add a vertex and sort of shape them how you want. You can give them a name as well. They don't really have any other properties. So that's the basic diagramming experience. Just one or two other things to say in terms of the controls you can do. It has a grid. I don't know if that comes across well. It's very, very faint, so hopefully you can see it. But there's a grid overlaid on the palette there, and then it means that maybe you can see that the elements are snapping to the grid. So that just allows you to kind of line things up and make the model look nice and tidy. There's a few of the usual sorts of controls, so you can cancel it, you can undo to the last save, or you can save the model. The usual features like that. The approach it takes for threats is one, instead of generating a whole ton of threats, it basically takes a different approach of just suggesting some possible threats to you that you can either accept or reject. Now, I should say that the threat generation logic today is exceptionally simple. It really just uses, okay, well, what type of stride threat types match each of the different process, flow, actor, etc., and just recommend some threats, generic threats based on those types. Our roadmap has some more sophisticated threat generation logic, but as I said, I don't want it to be like overwhelmingly sort of powerful and complex there, because as I say, that removes the need for people to think. So kind of philosophically, it's always, I think, going to be a relatively simple threat generation. But in any case, though, how it works, how it looks, is if there's the lightning bolt thing there is going to generate the threats according to whatever logic that you have, and suggest them to you. So if I click it, it starts off going, say, okay, it's going to try and recommend 6 different threats. That's because it's a process. That's an ST or ID and E threat all generated. And you can obviously edit the different the properties of them however you want. You can add mitigations if it's going to be mitigated. You can change its status from open to mitigated and its severity, high, medium, or low we have at the moment. You can either accept or ignore it. So it's kind of up to you as somebody doing the modeling whether you want to take notice of this or not. So if I ignore, okay, it'll just forget that, it won't add it to the model, and it'll just take me on to the next recommendation. So maybe I want to, I don't know, maybe I want to accept this one. And then I mean, we're kind of looking forward to the time when you have a lot more generated models, you can decide to either ignore or accept all of them. So if you check this checkbox here and click ignore or accept, it's going to just do that for all of the rest of the 3 or 4 suggested threats that are left. So if I do ignore, so what we're left with now is on the panel, on the diagram, the process that I was applying those threats to is now highlighted in red, and that's to signify that that element has some unmitigated threats on it. So red really is the areas where, as a threat modeler, you should be focusing your attention in terms of looking for mitigations. So if I click over here on the left, you can go from the kind of palette view, which is how you're building the diagram, over to the the threat view of it, and you get a tiny like summary of the different threats that are present there. You can add new ones, and you get the same kind of experience there as you would see for the suggested threats. You can delete them from there. So if I click that, the red X, that deletes them. It gives a bit of an indication about what they are. So the exclamation mark means that that's open, and the yellow or amber traffic light symbol is that it's a medium severity threat. That would be green for a lower one and red for a higher one. And from there, you can also view the detail of it, and you can edit it there as well. So if I want to say now, okay, well, that's mitigated because I fixed it, I can save it, and you can see that that's gone to a green check now, which means that that's mitigated, and the process is now showing as black rather than red. What else to say? So maybe if I show, if I cancel out of that and show the demo model, you kind of get a slightly better sense about what a real one would look like. So if I open the sample one, look at the diagram. This is more of a view about how it would work. Let me make it a bit bigger. This is more of a kind of real-world-ish model. So it's a mixture of, the idea of it is it's supposed to, without going into too much detail about the model, it's supposed to be like a QD-coupled web application with a background worker, just generic kind of application. And it has some elements which have unmitigated threats. It has some elements which are out of scope. So you can just generally see the kinds of threats that you might have on the message queue, for example. So it has threats about message secrecy, threats about threats about tampering, and threats about fake or poison messages. So, for example, that's a kind of more realistic model. Probably maybe the last thing to show is, if I cancel out of that, you can generate a report which is a summary of the whole of the model. Actually, there's a question there. So someone was asking, sorry, I didn't notice that, Kimberly, is there a way to see the suggested threats before clicking through them? I listed anywhere. There's not really. The idea behind that user experience is that when you do the threat generation, this is suggesting the threats that you might want to consider, and you kind of accept or reject them. Once they've been accepted or rejected, then you can view them. Then you can view them for each element based from here, as I showed, but you can't kind of see them before before you've decided to accept them.
It seems like that would be a good addition, so that it's less like you're getting a bunch of pop-ups when you have something come up, and more like you can see the list there.
It could be. I mean, to be honest, as I say, we're aiming for great user experience. Whether people can judge whether we've made it or not for themselves, but we're definitely open to suggestions like that. And we have a well, if you're in the application, you can submit an issue into GitHub to make any kind of suggestion like that. And we're very, very open to them.
Yeah, it looks really useful so far. I'm just kind of digging through some of this here. It's awesome.
So maybe the last feature of it is this thing about report. So this is one of the most at the time it was one of the most asked for features. It just gives you a kind of like a single document overview of the whole model. You have some very limited controls on it. So you can say, okay, well, I want to hide the things which are out of scope to make the report a bit more concise. I'm not actually interested in what mitigations I've put in place. So you can hide them as well, or show them. But I do want to keep the diagrams, and you can, or you can make a combination of them. It gives you like the description stuff that you put at the top, and it just goes diagram by diagram, showing the diagram itself, and then for each element in the diagram, the threats, and a summary of them for each one. And again, if you decide you want to show the mitigated ones, you'll see if there's a mitigated threat there. And you can either save it or print it, save it as a PDF or print it. This is for for showing to your manager, or for putting in, if you have project documentation of that type, you could put it in there. So that's the report. Well, so we have quite good documentation. If I just show this is the documentation site. So as you can see, it's kind of branded the same as the application itself. And it has, well, sort of basic instructions about how to do the different the different parts of it. Relatively comprehensive. We keep that up to date as things are added. What else? So it's all on all the code's on GitHub. Actually, this is moving from my personal GitHub to the OWASP GitHub organization. In fact, it has moved. We haven't updated the links yet, but the code's all there. It's been reasonably commonly forked, followed, and starred, so it's kind of getting some type of traction, which is great, really great to see. We try and maintain things like the READMEs quite well. So if this is the README for the web version, and you can see there's quite good instructions about how you go about installing the web version if you want to run it yourself. We also keep there's a permanently up like demonstrator of it as well if you wanted to just try it. But bear in mind, it does ask for quite significant permissions for your GitHub, so you might want people do push back on that quite a lot. Yeah, so we try and keep the code, the README quite nice and up to date. We have quite good unit test coverage. I think it's at the top. So the coverage is 97%, which is high, and the code quality generally is pretty high. We try well, in my opinion. I don't know, actually, in the opinion of Code Climate. It's Apache licensed. We have vulnerability disclosure with my PGP key, if you detect any vulnerabilities. And that's about it, I think. That's in terms of demo and stuff is concerned. Again, I'll probably pause there for any more comments or questions. And I've got just one last slide, if we've time, about what the next steps for the project are. But I'd really rather listen to people's questions and comments than go through the roadmap if there are any.
Does anyone have any questions here? You can speak up.
You can write in the chats. They can't really speak up because it's a webinar session, but
oh, gotcha.
We are monitoring both chat windows.
Well, I mean, there's no questions as far as I can tell, unless I'm looking in the wrong place. So if I just very quickly just talk about what the next steps for the project are. And if there are any questions, I mean, you can still put them in the chat for the next few minutes, or I think my Twitter and email address are on the speaker notes for the summit anyway, I think. So you can be able to contact me there, or obviously put issues on GitHub. We're very, very open to issues, even more open to pull requests. So in terms of the next steps, I've broken them down into short, medium, and long term. So in the short term, really, it's about the open issues that are there today on GitHub. One of the most popular ones is an undo feature. This is one of the reasons why we were looking to remove the library, the diagramming library. It's proved to be surprisingly difficult to implement an undo feature on it. So I think a move to a new library would help that significantly. It's maybe the most requested feature. All you can do at the moment is undo to your last save. You can't undo step by step. Automatic update, very important, I think. So today the Windows version has automatic update, but we've not been able to get it to work so far on the Mac version due to certificates, like application signing problems. So that's something I think we need to do as it's becoming popular. I mean, I think we need to be able to let people know about new versions in a more reliable way than just GitHub releases. In the medium term, as I mentioned, we're looking to replace the diagramming library. The Angular version that it's using is also end-of-lifing next year, so that's going to be something which we need to evaluate how difficult I think that's going to be to replace and what we want to replace it with. So it may be that we don't want to use Angular anymore, we use something else. And the other medium-term issue is this excessive permissions for the web application that I mentioned. That's if we're going to have a web application, we need to fix that, because it's never going to be okay for people, I think, to give it the access that it needs. Either that, or we need to make it much more easy for people to self-host. So have a Docker, sort of containerize it, for example, or have like something for like CloudFormation or something that will deploy to to a cloud hosting environment very, very simply. And the longer term, it's really, I think it should be all about the pipeline integration. So having an API to pull out open threats, having CLI tools to support the, plugging into the various different pipeline tools that people have, including GitHub. And that's about it. So there's 6 minutes left. I do, unfortunately, I need to leave slightly ahead of 1:30, but I've still got time for any other comments or questions if there are any. But if not, I mean, thank you very much for listening. And as I say, I mean, please try out the tool. We're very, very welcome with feedback. Definitely even more welcome with pull requests, like I said. And I think to make the tool a success, I mean, we need people to try it, see how they like it, give us the feedback, and also contribute if they feel interested and can.
So
we do have one. Oh, sorry.
Oh, is there a question? Sorry, I didn't notice.
We do have one question from Kimberly. She says, as a newbie, do you recommend using it to work out threats from the suggestions, or do an investigation, then input the findings here?
So the threats today are just very, very generic threats. So if you look at the documentation on Stride, it has for each element type, so a data flow, a process, and so on. It says that there's a set of only a subset of the Stride threat types are applicable to each type of element, and all that it does today is apply generics, like a generic spoofing threat, a generic tampering threat, according to the threat type per element model. So it's really not going to help you in terms of real world threats. So you could do that, but I wouldn't. You certainly shouldn't just take the text of the threat and accept it. You should think, okay, well, this is suggesting I think about spoofing threats for this element. What type of spoofing threats might I have? And then edit the text edit the text as appropriate. But I think more commonly people are using it just without the threat generation, and just because it really doesn't add much at the moment, and just doing what I'll call kind of normal threat modeling through just sort of discussion around like a whiteboard or a screen to identify what you think the relevant threats are. So I hope that answers the question, Kimberly.
She says, thank you. Any other questions here? If not, I think, yeah, someone wanted to thank you for reminding them that Threat Dragon is out there.
No problem.
They might use it for. Go ahead.
I'm talking on it at the well, I assume it goes ahead at the AppTech conference in San Francisco later in the year. So hopefully it'll be a little bit more. It'll be maybe in labs instead of incubator by then.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, thanks very much, guys. Hope you enjoyed the rest of the summit. And see you later.
Thank you. We definitely appreciate it.
Bye.
Mike, see you later.
Bye.
And thank you, Stephen, as well, for organizing this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thanks very much for the invite. I enjoyed it.
That's just a small effort of sending an invite, so it's quite okay.
But it made a difference. So thank you.